This is Graham from LSAT Hacks, and in this video I'm going to tell you how to take a timed LSAT test. And first of all, why take a timed LSAT test? Especially why take one correctly? Probably you already think, if you're watching this video, you already think you should be timing them, but in case that's not what you're thinking, timed LSATs are useful because they give you an accurate measure of your score. And especially when you first start your studies, you want to know where you start, so that by the time you've studied for a month or two, you can see whether you've made progress. If you start with only untimed work, one, you're not practicing for what it's really going to be like on test day, and two, you'll never know how much progress you made because you don't have a baseline. So take a time test before you do anything else. That said, you can do some untimed work, but you should be timing as well. But the bigger issue is a lot of people think they're timing right, but they're not. So in this video, I'm going to show the main guidelines for how to properly do a timed LSAT so your scores are actually accurate and you don't have them inflated compared to what you're going to get on test day. So first of all, the LSAT is a 4-section test, 4 sections of 35 minutes, and there's a 15-minute break. And you should be strict about this. You shouldn't add in extra breaks. This is really common. You can't take any extra time. Some people at the end of a section will start just answering a few questions they didn't get to and counting that, or bubbling in answers at the end. You can't do any of that on test day, but it's really common. So don't cheat yourself and don't do that because you're not going to get an accurate score. The other thing to mention is that on test day, there'll be something called an experimental section. This is an extra 35-minute section. It doesn't count for your score, but it looks exactly like all the other ones. It's used to make new problems, so there's no way you're going to be able to tell which one is experimental. But it's going to add 35 minutes. So yes, that's pretty grueling. So this is going to add a whole other section of mentally intense work. So to get an accurate score, if you find you have endurance issues, meaning that by the end of the test you're doing worse than at the start, you should add in a 5th experimental section from an older test to properly simulate this. However, if you're just getting started and doing your first test and you don't have other tests on hand, don't let that stop you from taking a diagnostic. Take the diagnostics first, and you can do this for future tests. It's not the most essential part, but know that it's going to be there. So the format of the test itself on test day is on paper. This is a LSAT prep test number 78, and this is what the test will look like. All paper. So if you have an electronic one, don't do it on a computer. You need a paper LSAT. If you have a form that can be printed so that it looks like this, such as a PDF, that's fine. If you have a Kindle or a EPUB or something, that's unfortunately not a good format to take the LSAT in, so you want the paper test. So always print it before you take it. Circle your answers on here, and also put them on this answer sheet. There's 2 reasons to use the answer sheet. One is that bubbling errors are really common. So you answer C, but then you mark down D. I see this all the time. So if you don't put your answers in the booklet and also bubble them, you won't know which ones you misbubbled. And you need to work on not misbubbling, so you should be doing this. Second, filling in the bubble answer sheet takes about 3 minutes per section, which is about 10% of your time. So if you're not using the bubble answer sheet, you're giving yourself an extra 10%, and that's going to inflate your score, and on test day, you're going to be disappointed because you score lower than you think you're scoring at. So use the bubble sheets, use proper time. I'm going to have a link under the video where you can get a printable bubble sheet. One other thing is there's no scrap paper on the LSAT, so all of your markings should be done on here. Some people avoid doing tests on here because they want to reuse the tests, which is, I think, actually a very good idea. But to do that, you can just, take photocopies of the sections you're going to repeat, such as logic games, but then do it on here. There's a lot of physical feedback you get from doing the test, and you have to practice making the diagrams by the questions. So no scrap paper, do everything on here. Those are the main parts. The other bits that are important are what you write with. For instance, a lot of people use mechanical pencils. Don't do this, they're not allowed. I know you love them, they're great, but you have to use wooden pencils. Number 2 or HB. Don't do all of your practice using something you're not allowed to use on test day. You can have an eraser. I like these white vinyl ones. Note that you can't have eraser sleeves, so the erasers come in a little sleeve like this. You have to take it off. You can have a pencil sharpener on your desk. And that's pretty much it. You're also allowed a highlighter, but there's not really much point to having one. So those are the things you should be taking a test with. The last thing is timing. You should have 2 things to time yourself with. One, to actually check how much time has elapsed. Use one of these mechanical watches, because that's all you're allowed to have on test day to check your time. A lot of people buy a special LSAT watch, but that's not necessary, and I don't think even very helpful. Instead, you can set a watch, like I've set it here, to 25 minutes to noon. And what that means is once you start it, noon will be the end of your section, so you can see how many minutes you've got left. And then people get worried about like winding these things. They think it like takes time. Here's a watch at noon. I pull out the pin, I turn it back, and it's set to go. That took like 2.5 seconds. I think people just like don't wear these things anymore, and so don't realize how easy it is to wind them. But you can get this. It's like a $10 watch on Amazon. Works perfectly. Then you just start it, and you're good to go for the section. So use this because you can't use a cell phone to time yourself during the test. However, to keep official time when you're timing yourself, the watch is, might be off by like 30 seconds or so, and it's not going to like ding and tell you a 5-minute warning. It's not going to tell you exactly when to stop. So I also recommend using a Proctor app in the background. There's an app by a company called 7 Sage that I'm just going to show you here. So this blue one. And what this does is it just reads like the official instructions from test day. I'll just give you a quick sample.
This time you may now read, work on, make marks or erasures in, or turn the page.
So those are actually exactly what they're going to read on test day. This follows official timing to a T. So just use this, put your phone in airplane mode, put it out of sight so it's not distracting, and just listen to it give the instructions. This takes away the need to use willpower to properly time yourself, because a lot of people give themselves like extra breaks thinking it won't matter. They'll like do a few set questions at the end. And another thing people do is like time will be called and then they'll keep bubbling their answers. You cannot do that on test day. I've heard stories of people that have their whole score canceled because they filled in like 3 bubbles after the section's done. So use the Proctor and just follow it like exactly, and then you'll be practicing according to official time. Also note that you have to work on only one section at a time. You cannot go back to a prior section. And that's it. You now know how to take a timed LSAT test. So every time you take an LSAT prep test or an LSAT section, you should do it timed like this with the bubble sheet, and then you'll know that the scores that you're getting are really the scores that you'll get on test day. To sum up all the stuff that I said, first, you should time yourself so that you know what kind of score you're going to expect on test day. Use a Proctor app so that you have exact time kept, but use a watch to check your time yourself, because that's all you're allowed. Use wooden HB or number 2 pencils rather than mechanical pencils, because that's what's allowed on test day. You are allowed a pencil sharpener and an eraser with no sleeve. Do the test on paper, make sure to use the bubble answer sheet, and don't use any scrap paper. Photocopy your test and make extra copies if you want to do it again. And that's it. So good luck.